Welcome to The Lock Shop with Nielsen and Hustler, powered by Coolbet Canada.
All right, let's go. It's another episode of the Fantasy Football Extravaganza. It's the Lock Shop's Fantasy Football Extravaganza, brought to you by our wonderful partners at Coolbet. If you've not yet used the code to sign up, make sure you do today. We got week 3 in the NFL coming up, fantasy, sports betting, lots to get to there. Just use the code LOCKSHOP when you sign up at Coolbet.com. 100% deposit bonus on your initial deposit, up to $200. Huss, happy Fantasy Tuesday. How are you, buddy?
Right back at you, Dusty. I'm good. Shout out to you. Great picks last night. You were on the Eagles. I was on the Vikes, but we were all smiling watching the Bills steamroll the Titans last night. I mean, your Titans under came through. My Bills over came through. We got the spread. Everything except Gabe Davis not playing, so that was a push. But overall, a nice way to finish betting-wise. But I have to say, after the incredible comebacks and the action early on Sunday, the Bears-Packers game was a dud, and there was absolutely no drama in either of those football games last night. I was all jacked up for a big Monday night doubleheader.
Yeah, it's true.
Usually the NFL gets pretty lucky with those thrillers. Not last night. I mean, a complete destruction. That game was over in the third quarter for the Bills. I mean, I'm not even sure Josh Allen played a play in the fourth quarter. And, man, there's a lot of bent Viking fans around here that had a lot of hopes about that football game. And Philly, listen, I said they need to make me a believer. I'm a lot closer to being a believer in the Eagles after that performance they put on the Vikes last night.
Well, and from a fantasy perspective, Jalen Hurts, and we knew this coming in. I mean, he wasn't being drafted as a 1 or 2 guy. He was being drafted in that probably 5 to 8 range in the quarterbacks. But what you've seen so far is that best case scenario for people who drafted Hurts, where Jalen Hurts looks like a straight up league winner that you might have been able to get in the 6th or 7th round of your draft, Huss. And that changes everything. I mean, if Hurts continues to play the way that he's playing, a couple rushing touchdowns, 50, 60 yards, Jalen Hurts is a guy, if he wants to run for 100 yards in a football game, he'll go run for 100 yards in a football game. But the fact that, over 300 yards passing, majority of it extremely accurate, and with a lot of pressure coming into this year, both from the fantasy football community, but more importantly, the Philadelphia Eagles, with all these first-round picks in 2023, this guy basically had to secure his career, and there's a long way to go, but it looks like a really nice start.
He's a stud. I remember all the talk about him. Of course, he lost a job to Tua at Alabama.
Yep.
And they thought, he's a great athlete, but he's not an NFL quarterback, and fell, to the 3rd round, and then took Carson Wentz's job, and now exactly right. I mean, he is a fantasy football all-star right now.
A darling.
I mean, he had a huge game just passing. Never mind his 57 and 2 touchdowns on the ground. That was a huge performance for him, and you're exactly right. Where that team is, considering the trades that they've made, what a position they're in, knowing that if Hurts can establish himself as a winning everyday NFL quarterback, what else they can do with that team with the draft capital they've acquired. Good times in Philly right now, and they are rewarding people that had faith in them early on in the season. That was a big win last night.
Quick look at the 2022 Fantasy Football Extravaganza Listener League. Dusty's Destroyers falling to 1-1. Tom Brady projected for 22 points, got me 11. Derrick Henry projected for 17 points, got me 8.5. I ended up losing by 7 points to Dirty Randy. This week I take on Team Wilsonators. I also, not that I would have started him anyway, but Garrett Wilson, 30 points on my bench this week in the Listener League. Huss, that one stings just a little bit.
Oh, you want to sting with Garrett Wilson? I'll see you that and raise you dropping him after week 1 last week when I picked up. I was in a league where, I picked a bunch of rookies, and I really couldn't have them all. And I was forced into it because of the Elijah Mitchell trade to drop somebody and drop Wilson. And we'll be going right back to the waiver wire this week to try to get Garrett Wilson, as I'm sure he'll be one of the top pickups of the week. That game, by the way, the comeback by the Jets, completely overshadowed by what the Dolphins did and 6 touchdowns. And then Kyler Murray looking like Michael Vick in 2004 Madden. But the Jets comeback was absolutely ridiculous. last 2 minutes, 2 touchdowns, but Garrett Wilson was a threat all night long. And, listen, like so many of these guys, we hear about them, we see them in the rankings, but it's until you actually see them on the football field making plays, you see how they'll fit in the National Football League. Seems like the Jets have a real playmaker in Garrett Wilson. And once Zach Wilson comes back, if he can give them an even better level, although Flacco was looking pretty elite on Sunday.
4 touchdown passes, 300 yards.
I'm excited about the Jets' young offensive core going forward. I don't know how many games they're going to win this year, but in the next couple of years, they could
have some pieces. Yep.
A significant team in the AFC, and we haven't said that in a long time.
Yeah, no, that's a pretty good point, buddy. I would agree with that. So, yeah, we'll see. We'll get into here's what we got coming up for today. We're going to take a quick look at the injury report. There's a few discussions to have coming out of there. We're going to give you our favorite waiver wire targets for the week, starts of the week as well at all of the positions. So, busy episode to get to. And there's a few discussions that we can get to coming out of some injuries over this past weekend. Once Davis Price, running back, San Francisco, he's going to be out for a couple of weeks. They're already down to Jeff Wilson Jr. We talked about Jordan Mason last week. So, if you manage to pick him up, you might be in a little bit of a better spot. Could also be a waiver wire target this week. Dalton Schultz expected to miss a week. Good news on Michael Pittman. Looks like Pittman might be trending towards playing in week 3. The big one was Trey Lance, and not so much from a Trey Lance perspective, but from a fantasy perspective for everybody else in the Niners. Like, if you're Debo's going to be Debo, but if you're a Debo Samuel owner, now you know Jimmy Garoppolo sliding back in and how they used Debo last year with Jimmy Garoppolo, a quarterback. I think that probably makes you very happy. Brandon Ayuk, all through the summer and training camp, apparently had a great connection with Trey Lance. So as a guy who has Brandon Ayuk in a few leagues, I'm not as confident now moving forward, Huss. But that's the one thing from all these injuries. You kind of just look at it and you go, oh, especially with the quarterbacks. But a lot of these players, the trickle-down effect, you look at the Trey Lance injury and you go, oh, wow, if you have Trey Lance, you're kind of screwed. But it's everybody else that gets impacted by it, and that's what we're going to see with San Francisco.
I'd argue that every receiver in San Francisco goes up a couple notches with this move. I mean, Trey Lance, listen, it's almost unfair to have him in this position. The guy has barely played any football in the last 3 years. He's had 1 year in North Dakota State. In one game, the COVID year, was drafted and then, essentially sat behind Jimmy G last year. He was running the football like 13, 15 times a game. I mean, I hate to say it, but that's how you get a quarterback killed. I mean, it's one thing to be able to go and, make a play when, the situation demands it. It's another thing to just check down and immediately start running on, 1 out of every 2 plays. So, listen, the Niner offense, I think, will be better off for it. We've already seen their Super Bowl odds drop with this news. And, I sort of feel for Trey Lance because there's so much pressure that comes with being a top pick like that with the draft capital they gave up to do it. But with that comes huge expectations. And, it's going to be a long, long year and offseason for Trey Lance. And presuming that Jimmy goes somewhere else at the end of this season, that job will be there for him. But I think still a big, big question mark as to how he pans out, fairly or unfairly, after such little time behind center.
I love the NFL, man. I love the CFL too. Like, I love both leagues. I just love the fact that we get to do this. Like betting and fantasy is like 10 Dusty would be like, you're kidding me, right? Like, this is what you get to do in 25 years. I'm like, yes, sir. That is what I get to do in 25 years. Kid.
Follow your dreams.
Exactly. When your parents say, stop worrying about fantasy and do your homework, tell them to screw off. You got this thing under control. All right, waiver wire. Not as sexy as it was coming out of week 1. Us. I mean, I'm looking at the waiver wire right now, and I mean, I will start with this. And this was one of our guys last week. I don't know how. And I was looking into one article I was reading this morning. He's still just owned in 67% of leagues over at ESPN. Curtis Samuel is still just 67% owned over at ESPN. I mean, that should be an 80 to 85% number at least. And then the only ones that you wouldn't own him in are probably like 10-team leagues. So it doesn't make any sense. If Curtis Samuel, for some reason, is still available in your league, pick him up. I just saw that jump off the page when it said he's only 67% owned in ESPN leagues. I didn't see CBS or Yahoo or Sleep or anything like that. I'm assuming it's probably a higher number there, but to see him available in 33% of leagues was absolutely ridiculous. One other receiver quickly from my list, Sterling Shepard, New York Giants. He's been targeted 10 times. When Sterling Shepard has been healthy in the past, he just can never stay healthy. But when he has been healthy in the past, he's been flexible in a lot of weeks. And I think that's probably what you're seeing again here. Obviously going through the season, draft season, it was Kadarius Toney. Their usage of Kadarius Toney is obviously pissing a lot of people off. But Sterling Shepard, if you're desperate for a wide receiver, once again, there's not a lot of guys that, if I have a waiver priority this week, I'm at the top, and I think in one of my leagues I'm number 2. I'm probably not rushing and dying to get to the waiver wire this week, but Sterling Shepard would be a wide receiver that I would look at. Huss, what do you got for waiver wire action this week?
Yeah, well, the guy that I mentioned right off the hop, Garrett Wilson, he didn't do much in the first week, but this was a real breakout game for him. And, considering where the Jets are in their growth, they're sort of building this foundation. As I mentioned, Zach Wilson's going to come back at a certain point, but I think Salah will certainly be trying to give young playmakers the football as much as possible. And much like we saw against Cleveland on the weekend, there's a good chance that they'll be playing in high-scoring games or at least have plenty of garbage time. So I think Garrett Wilson could absolutely be a guy on your roster that you could put in when needed. And I think there's a big upside with him. From a running back perspective, and you touched on the San Francisco backfield situation, interesting in Atlanta that Tyler Algier finally got in and, ended up sort of splitting the carries. That's nice. So, if you're looking for another upside on a young player, if he's there, he could.
He had 10 carries last week, right? He and Patterson both had 10 carries. Patterson can be more involved in the passing game, but this is the path for him to eventually maybe get that gig.
Absolutely. And obviously injuries can happen. The fact that they're confident enough to put him in and then give him the Brock a number of times is positive. But I'll tell you what, Raheem Mostert, I think, is the guy that if you're screwed for a running back right now, if you can get him, you'll be in a very good spot. Quiet first game. And we wanted to see how this Dolphins offense sort of materialized. First of all, the emergence of Tua as a legit passing threat with the 6 touchdowns, I think is going to open up the run game for Miami. And Chase Edmonds has proven to be more of a guy that, is catching passes. We'll have a few. But, Mostert had 11 carries for 51 yards. A nice average, and also caught 3 balls for 28. Raheem Mostert is a reliable running back that can bury the load of 10 to 20, 25 touches in a game. I wouldn't at all be surprised to see Mostert continue to be, not a bell cow guy that's going to get 20 touches, but definitely get 15 plus a game. And considering the scarcity of running backs that you can say that about, with his track record, I like his spot in Miami right now. So if you are stuck for a running back, I'd go Raheem Mostert right now if he's available in your league.
I'm cringing a little bit as a multiple Chase Edmonds owner. Chase Edmonds was that guy in round 6 or 7. If you're looking for a running back, was a guy that, and I was looking at the usage of them in week 2, and I'm like, what the hell is going on? So little concerned, probably going to kill each other along the way, from a value perspective. But if you can hit the week that, Mostert will have a week somewhere along the way, that'll certainly help. I got 2 other names here. One is tight end Logan Thomas of the Washington Commanders. He's been dealing with injuries over the last few years, but when he was healthy prior to injuries kind of kicking in, it looked like, they might be onto something there. He's back now. He's been targeted double-digit times already in that Washington offense. A Washington offense that, the Commanders might not get to where we thought they'd get to last year, but offensively, they look like a team that could definitely be, offensively, they're going to be leaps and bounds better than they were last year. I don't know if the overall package comes together, but in 2 games, Logan Thomas has been targeted 11 times, 6 catches, 82 yards, and a touchdown already. And it's tough now because for the longest time, it was just Terry McLaurin and Logan Thomas. But now you mix in Dotson and you mix in Curtis Samuel healthy for now. If all those guys are healthy, Thomas probably doesn't have that top 7 or 8 tight end potential, but if one of those guys goes down, that's going to pump up some targets for this guy who should be targeted rather regularly in the end zone, I think, simply because of his size and the mismatch that he may provide. So, if you're in let's say you drafted Cole Kmet And Cole Kmet has put up a couple of goose eggs so far in a Bears offense that concerns you. I was a big Cole Kmet guy. I mean, he's still out there. He's just not getting involved at all. So if you're nervous about Cole Kmet, like Thomas would be a guy that I might maybe you just stash Kmet for a bit, start Thomas if he's out there, and hope for the best. So he's kind of like a problem solver at the tight end position right now.
Well, I have got a problem. I got Dalton Schultz. He's got 1.8 points.
Yeah.
The last game, I think, had like 1 or 2
and he's
in game
hurt
number
now.
1, and now he's going to be out. So I had Logan Thomas quite a bit last season. He was very, very serviceable for one of those guys kind of in that bottom tier of startable tight ends. And listen, Washington obviously started off against the Jags in Detroit, so those were somewhat good. But the fact that they were down so much, especially in the Lions game, I think tells you that they're going to be giving up points all season long. And Carson Wentz so far has put a clinic of putting up big numbers in the second half of these football games. Now, they did win the first one. It was more lipstick on a pig in the game against Detroit, but I think this situation is going to repeat itself, and that's going to mean some nice value for Commanders' skill position players in fantasy football.
Before we get to our starts of the week, I do have one more waiver wire that I'm just going to say it because it's been a good 2 weeks. I have him in my 16-team league, and I've started him both weeks in my 16-team league. It's Jared Goff of the Detroit Lions. Jared Goff and that offense in general. I mean, they put up over 30 points in back-to-back games. I know it's not going to happen all the time, but if you're desperate for a quarterback or you decided that you were going to stream quarterback this year, or you're in a 16 team like I am, and I just didn't have the picks to get quarterbacks early. I had to take a quarterback late, and I took Jared Goff, and I'm very pleased with what I've seen so far. So it's a stretch right now, but I'm just saying, like, you know, you can have a watch list Jared Goff and just see how this goes.
Hey, Jared Goff's going to put up some numbers this year. I mean, he's got some awesome receivers. And that is even before the kid they picked out of Alabama.
Jameson Williams. He's not rolling in until like second half.
Season. Yeah. And I'll tell you what, they can run the football. Swift is awesome. Jamal Williams popping in there, and that's only going to help them continue. And the other thing is they're going to give up some points. So much like Washington, I think for fantasy players, we're going to be taking lots of overs with these teams, and we're going to be starting some guys that – and we'll be the ones paying attention to these 21-point deficits in the fourth quarter because there's a lot of fantasy goodness that comes out of those mismatches. And I wouldn't be surprised if both of those teams are involved in plenty of those as we go forward.
All right, let's dive into our starts of the week. Huss kind of laid this out nicely in our previous episode. For a lot of pretty much all the guys that we're going to talk about, you're starting. I mean, there's not really sleepers. Maybe we add a sleeper actually at some point here moving forward over the next few episodes. 1 or 2 sleepers that maybe you aren't going to start. But a lot of these guys would be guys that we're looking at in DFS this week, guys that expect to have a big week, maybe a get-right week. So, Huss, let's start at the quarterback position, buddy. Who do you like at the quarterback this week?
Well, listen, I think maybe the biggest story in the league right now has been the starts of the 2 Super Bowl teams. Now, I know that the Rams hung on against Atlanta to get to 1-1, but this start for the Bengals has been an absolute nightmare. I mean, they're 0-2. Joe Burrow has been getting murdered, and I think they spent like $80 million to shore up the offensive line. I think they went to the wrong store or something like that because the guys have not been getting it done, and they have to turn this around. And to me, I mean, a loss for Cincinnati to the Jets to go 0-3, I mean, could potentially put them in a situation that, never mind winning the division, they might be in threats of not making the playoffs. So I think this is a huge, huge game for the Bengals. And I don't know, I still believe in Joe Burrow and the chips are down coming up and getting it done. And let's not forget, the Bengals lost in New York last year to the Jets in a big upset. So I think with their season on the line and staring 0-3 in the face, I think the protection gets better. I think Joe Burrow has a big game, and I think that means the young Sauce Gardner there, the early pick at on the corner for the Jets, whether he's getting T. Higgins or whether he's getting Jamar Chase, he better be ready to play because I do think this will be a big game for the Bengals offense and one that they simply have to have, and I think Joe Burrow leads the way. I'm looking for a big, big performance from the Cincinnati quarterback.
I love Joe Burrow. I'm 100% doubling down with you on Joe Burrow this week. I mean, if we wanted to make a consensus start of the week, this is a get-right game for Joe Burrow. If you can't get right here, I don't know if you are going to get right in this situation. But the other guy I'll throw out there, you got Joe Burrow. I'm going to throw out Derek Carr in this situation, going up against the Tennessee Titans. I mean, we saw what happened recently with the Titans, and it was not good. Different animal, obviously. But Derek Carr, and you look at these guys, kind of a similar thing with Jared Goff, to be honest with you. When you've got a wide receiver that is elite, and Amon St. Brown has become that guy for Jared Goff, and I mean, Devonta Adams has been an absolute monster so far. I think he got targeted 17 times or something in one of these two games. Not in both games, in one of the games he was targeted that many times. I think this is a big week for Derek Carr. The Raiders gotta have this. Like, they gotta have it. They've already lost to.
Go to the Titans. This is
it's true. It's true. You're right.
Who's going to be 0-3? And if they're 0-3, do they have any chance? I guess the Titans, being in that shitty AFC South, would have a much better chance. I'll tell you right now, if the Raiders go 0-3 and lose this game after the way they choked against the Cardinals last week, I don't want to say that we'd be writing them off, but I mean, man, when you look at the neighborhood that they're in, they don't have the benefit of 2 games against Jacksonville and 2 games against the Houston Texans. They're going up against the Broncos and Kansas City and the Chargers. So an 0-3 start for Vegas would be deadly. I'm with you. Their season is on the line. Very similar to what we just said about Cincy.
Well, and their path to victory, I mean, just looking at this game from a start of the week perspective, the Titans' path to victory ain't through Ryan Tannehill. The Raiders' path to victory is through Derek Carr. Derek Carr needs to have a huge game, so I'm looking at 280, 300 yards, 3 touchdown passes in this game. So I like him. He's probably a very good value in DFS this week. And, might be a guy that you have on your bench. Might not be an every week starter in fantasy in a 12-team league. Probably want to start Derek Carr this week in a 12-team league. So my start of the quarterback, also a shout-out once again to Joe Burrow, who Huss is on, but I'll go with Derek Carr. What about running back, Huss? Who do you like this week?
Well, I've actually got 2, and one's maybe a little bit more of a sleeper, but the top guy that, is always going to be in your lineup anyways, but even in a DFS, I think he'll be highly priced and probably maybe less owned considering what we saw yesterday, was Dalvin Cook. I mean, Dalvin Cook did almost nothing yesterday, along with the rest of the Vikings offense. They're going up against the upstart Detroit Lions at home. I think this is a clear-cut, huge bounce-back game for Dalvin Cook after only 17 yards yesterday against the Eagles. So I'm going to look forward to playing him on teams that I have, and he's a guy that I think I will look at in a DFS perspective as well to put in. But the other guy, and this is maybe a little bit more off the radar, although I think many people where they picked him in fantasy, season-long fantasy drafts would have him as a starter or borderline, is that rookie running back Dameon Pierce in Houston. He had a really nice game. He got 15 carries, had 69 yards. It seems like Lovie Smith is feeling more and more confident about giving the rookie the majority of the workload. And guess who they have? They've got the Bears coming off that late game on Sunday where they got simply gashed on the ground by Aaron Jones all night long. So listen, I think Houston right now with where they're at, they're going to give the young players like Dameon Pierce plenty of opportunity if they continue to reward them the way they did last week. They hung in that game against Denver. So I like Pierce to maybe have the biggest game of his young career. He only has 2 games under his belt, but get potentially over 20 touches against a team in Chicago where I think we've seen you can run against them right now.
I'm gonna go with Lenny Fournette. Gets the Green Bay Packers. We just saw David Montgomery run for 132 yards against the Green Bay Packers. Now, there's a lot of rushing opportunities there for Chicago because they refused to let Justin Fields throw the ball. They threw the ball 11 times. But they ran on the Green Bay Packers. Dalvin Cook, 90 yards in week 1 against the Green Bay Packers. And that was a game in which, probably could have had even more. So the Green Bay Packers are going to surrender yards on the ground. Leonard Fournette so far, he's due for a week here. Not that he hasn't played well so far. But when you look at what's currently the situation, and I know with Tampa Bay, you just stack the box maybe because they're not going to have a lot of options, but it's still Tom Brady. You're still going to have to give him that respect. So for the season, Leonard Fournette, week 1, 21 carries. Week 2, 24 carries. There aren't a lot of guys who've dropped 20 carries on you in each of the first 2 weeks of the season, but he hasn't found the end zone just yet. And he finished with 15.7 PPR points in week 1 and just 9.4 PPR points in week 2. And if you're going to be Leonard Fournette and you're going to get over 20 carries again against the Green Bay Packers, I like your chances of getting to the end zone, and I like your chances of hitting 100 yards. So I think it's a great matchup for Leonard Fournette. I think he's due to find the end zone a couple of times here. So Leonard Fournette will be my running back start of the week, buddy.
Hey, by the way, and this just goes back to the waiver wire or free agents, especially if you have Leonard Fournette, but if you have spot on your bench to prospect a little bit, Rachaad White, the second running back in Tampa, clearly the number 2 guy. Listen, I'm not sure whether Lenny just continues to get the amount of workload he will all season long, but certainly in the event of injury, there's only one guy there. Might not be a bad guy to stash on your bench. Rachaad White, rookie running back for the Bucks.
All right, what are you doing at wide receiver this week, buddy?
Well, I'm going to a guy that I kind of expected more from last night, but when Jalen Hurts was doing his thing on prime time, the receivers didn't need to step up very much, but it's A.J. Brown. And I think A.J. Brown, even albeit on a short week, goes into a game against this
Great
Washington
matchup.
secondary and absolutely feasts. We saw what the Lions did to them last week. The Jaguars as well in Trevor Lawrence's first game under Doug Peterson. So I like A.J. Brown to go off with a monster game after sort of a surprisingly quiet game, considering the way they beat up on the Vikings and really had their own way offensively.
I love the A.J. Brown play as well. I also had him down on my paper as well. I think I will be hammering, and we'll obviously talk about this as we work our way through the week here on the Lock Shop. We're going to have a CFL episode Wednesday, Thursday Night Football episode, Friday our full picks, and then Saturday we'll dive into some of these. I'm all over it on A.J. Brown this week. I mean, I'll probably be setting around the 70, 75-ish range, and I'm going to be hammering the over on A.J. Brown with his matchup this week. So A.J. Brown was number 1 on my list. I'm going to come back around. I don't even know if I should do this. This is one that could certainly backfire on me, and I'm not, start Amon-Ra St. Brown every week. The guy's an absolute stud. I mean, I could literally put him in this spot every single week. I want to know where you come out on this guy, because I'm going to go on a little bit of a limb this week, and I'm going to go CeeDee Lamb of the Dallas Cowboys as my start of the week. I know, I'm doing it. And anybody who's listened or watched this podcast in the past, there's usually 1 or 2 weeks every single year where I'm like, this is a CeeDee Lamb week. And it hasn't happened very often, but they get the Giants this week. He was targeted 11 times in week 1. And when they switched to quarterback, he was also targeted 11 times in week 2. I mean, this guy's going to get double-digit targets. To me, when he eventually gets the ball in his hands, he's got the ability to break a big one. It's the Giants. So yeah, A.J. Brown was my number 1 choice. I'm not going to lie, but and then I did have CD penciled in underneath him. So I'll go with CeeDee Lamb. I'll ride with my guy one more time. His first 2 weeks have not been great, but I still think he's a phenomenal talent. No Dalton Schultz this week. That's one less. I think Gallup might return. Yep. Maybe that helps take a little bit of pressure off, the deep ball down the field. But yeah, we'll see. This is a ballsy one. We'll see how we come back around here next Tuesday. And if I'm sitting here going, what was CeeDee Lamb thinking? I hope.
Well, it's coming up next on First Take. Are the Dallas Cowboys better with Cooper Rush at quarterback? Hey, they got the win after looking so bad in that first game against Tampa. And I'll tell you what, listen, as a CD, if you have CeeDee Lamb, you got to feel much better about the way they played against Cincinnati. And Rush was competent. So, listen, I'm sure at the end of the week when we compare where CeeDee Lamb is to a bunch of other guys that maybe are playing in more dynamic offenses with better QBs, it might not compute. But the CeeDee Lamb stock is a hell of a lot higher after week 2 than it was after week 1, when he wasn't able to get many of those balls from Dak in the first place. And then, of course, Dak Prescott was out for a significant period of time. Be interesting to see though how that does affect, especially with Schultz being out. Not that he'd been targeted or hit very much.
Yeah.
And the uncertainty of the rest of the rest of the offense. Tony Pollard actually had a big game, which was interesting. Got in and caught some balls as well. They could probably, the best thing the Dallas Cowboys could do would be establish a pretty strong running game. But they've had issues on their O-line as well. So I'm not sure. You know me, I haven't been too in on the Cowboys throughout the year, but I do like the balls to throw at CeeDee Lamb in the situation right now going up. And hey, it's a great time to do it because it's also Monday night. So all eyes will be on that Cowboys offense. And do the Giants go 3-0? Look, we're gonna find out.
That would be pretty incredible. Tight end position. Hey, let's talk about this because we do have a question that came in today. And I don't think we're going to time in, but Dangle Dump on the live stream says, what is Kyle Pitts' trade value right now? Would you buy or sell on Kyle Pitts right now? Huss, what would you do?
Well, I guess I would buy because I think, considering the first two games that he's had, he's been almost non-existent, and it makes no sense. Drake London, the rookie receiver, has been getting a tons of balls and has been very, very productive. They've been running the football. I guess teams are just, focusing so much on Kyle Pitts right now that Mario is having a tough time getting him the football. Compared to other tight ends, I think he's an upgrade on most of the guys if you don't have the Kelsey, Waller, Kittle group. But put it this way, if I've invested in him, I don't think I'm trading him right now for 50 cents on the dollar. No, because I think that he's like, if there's a guy that just wants to get rid of him in your league, jump on it. But I think you have to be patient if you drafted Kyle Pitts, where you drafted him, to give him another 2, 3, 4, 5 weeks before you make a move. Hey, you might want to jump on a guy like Logan Thomas or another tight end on the waiver wire to give you another option if you're not comfortable with playing him. But I don't think it's time to quit on Kyle Pitts.
Yeah, I would be buying up as many Kyle Pitts shares as I possibly can. This can't continue. It can't. It's bizarre that it's already happened this way to start the season. It cannot continue. I would not sell on him. Unless you get an offer that completely blows you away. But at this point, you're not going to. So Huss is right. Many of you probably invested a third-round pick in Kyle Pitts. And now you're just going to dump them 2 weeks in? We have to remember, everybody, this is 2 weeks in. It's not even 10% of the schedule. Everybody just relax. If you can take advantage of an idiot and acquire Kyle Pitts, I would say do it. As for the rest of the tight end position, Huss, who's your start of the week?
Well, listen, this is maybe a little bit of a sleeper play here. And this is a guy that you can probably get on your waiver wire as well. It's Evan Engram from the Jacksonville Jaguars. Now, I had a little bit of Engram at the start in some overall leagues where I left tight end really, really late. And he didn't do very much in the first game. But he was very, very involved in the game on the weekend and ended up with 7 catches. Now, we know Jacksonville is going to give up points. Only the Colts can get shut out by the Jags. So as they move on, they're going to be in situations where, for instance, this week going up against the Chargers, I think there's big blowout potential in this game, presuming that Herbert is in. And I think that those are the sort of games that are going to give Trevor Lawrence plenty of opportunity to air things out to his receivers and to try to continue to build a rapport with Evan Engram. Engram has been productive earlier in his career, had a few really good, strong seasons with the Giants. So right now, both in the spot and the fact that he will basically be free on the waiver wire, if you're in a spot like me that's losing Dalton Schultz for this time, or you've been waiting for George Kittle to get in the lineup, I don't mind Evan Engram this week. And in DFS, I think he'll be a very low dollar baller. A guy where you can load up in some of the other positions with the opportunity to be pretty productive at a low price.
Yeah, I think Ingram's that's a really nice pick this week, especially for a guy that you can pick up and claim and likely start this week. I think that's pretty big.
He's on your waiver wire right now.
Yeah, I'm just trying to take a look here. I'm just bringing him up. Where is he? 3,700. 3,700 in DFS this week. Yeah. So, I mean, that's a pretty low budget target there. My start of the week, I mean, you can look at the top end guys. They're all going to have huge weeks for sure. Part of me thought about going with TJ Hawkinson this week against the Vikings. He's been targeted 7 times in each of the first 2 games, but he's come in with like 3 fantasy points and 2 fantasy points. I'm just going to go back to a guy I picked. I mean, get for 3,500 in DFS this week. Logan Thomas. I talked about Logan Thomas a little bit earlier on. I think there's a ton of potential here once again for this guy involved in this offense, and I just don't want to slide in here every single week and take these top end guys. I like a pick like Engram. I think this is what happens at the tight end position. If you don't have one of those top end guys, or you have a Kyle Pitts for some reason right now, I mean, you got to hit the waiver wire pretty hard to go out and save that position along the way if you didn't use some early draft capital on it. So I would expect the Eagles to jump out to a big lead here against Washington and Carson Wentz to move the ball, and maybe a touchdown coming here for Logan Thomas. So a little bit of a reach again, like us. If you're streaming tight ends, these would be 2 targets that you can go after this weekend. And at the end of the day, I mean, they're not going to win you the week, but they should at least get you something so that position doesn't cost you the week. And I think that's important when you're looking at a tight end position or a flex position sometimes.
One other tight end that you may be kind of on the fence about, Tyler Higbee. He had a nice bounce back game. He had 7 catches for 71 yards for the Rams, and they're playing against the Arizona Cardinals, who have no idea how to cover a tight end. I know they've seen Kelsey and Waller so far this year, but if you go back to last year, no team had a tougher time defending tight ends than the Arizona Cardinals, and it doesn't look like that's changed so far this year. So Higbee might be another good option if you're sort of in a jam this week.
All right. Anything else to add, Huss? I think we've kind of locked everything in. I had a guy text into my show today because I was kind of mocking him. He texted in like during drafts, and he's like, Dusty, I took Diggs at the end of round 1, Josh Allen at the beginning of round 2. And I was like, you moved way too early on Josh Allen. Like, I mean, because like I would never draft a quarterback at the beginning of the second round. But he texted in today and he goes, now what do you think, Dusty? Now what do you think of my Diggs Josh Allen stack? I was like, you son of a bitch. Okay, good for you. It's working for now. But I mean, that's a ridiculous duo. That's fun to watch.
Diggs is man, what a monster he was last night.
Yeah.
I mean, there was a guy that had a 42-point lead in my league and lost because Diggs put up 44 last night. I mean, it was huge. And listen, this Bills offense right now is just an absolute juggernaut. I'm literally counting down the days to October 16th at Arrowhead when we get Chiefs Bills, and I wouldn't at all be surprised if that was the first of 2 meetings this year. Without Gabriel Davis, I mean, they if this was a UFC match, I mean, the Titans submitted early. They tapped out before we even got to the 4th quarter yesterday. So no, the Mafia represented last night. They came through, and no sweat cover on that team total. And as I say, a lot of fantasy goodness for a lot of people that have invested in the Buffalo Bills.
All right, so once again, later in the week, if you are looking for some fantasy football advice, feel free to hit us up on Twitter. He's at Hustleram. I'm at Nielsen, TSN 1260. We'll likely try to get back to you as quick as we possibly can. And coming up this week with the Lock Shop, we will have CFL episode for you coming your way Wednesday. Some NHL futures are open, so maybe we'll dive into that a little bit as we work our way through the week. Some early leans on those. And then we got Thursday Night Football preview, full best bets for the weekend on Friday, some parlays and player props on Saturday, and then we get to do it all again on Sunday with week 3, buddy. Very excited for this.
I'm already locked in with my CFL picks. I could not wait to get
well, you're seeing the board well.
I am seeing the board well. I'm feeling good. So we'll do that tomorrow. Our picks for the Canadian Football League, and maybe even mix in a couple props for the President's Cup, which is getting underway this weekend. And the internationals with all the guys that have gone to live are about as massive an underdog as you could have in a team concept. But I'll be looking to see if there's any other angles for a couple wagers for the President's Cup. I always love those team events in the world of pro golf.
That is all coming up on the Lock Shop tomorrow. We'll talk to all of you then.